Hello and welcome to WriterHouse. My name is Joanna Lee. I am one of the founders of River City Poets. I'm here with my co-editors of Lingering in the Margins, Judy Melchiorre and Marsha Owens. And we're going to do a reading from our anthology today and follow that up with hopefully some questions from you guys on our process in putting the book together and any questions you might have about submitting or editing. We started out on just a much, humbler goal or humbler mission to support the writers in our immediate community in Richmond, in our critique group, per se, our workshops, who were asking how and struggling to get their first pieces published. And someone, I believe it was Marsha's idea, who said, well, we could create a venue to publish them. And I was like, no, that's way too much work.
No, that's not what she said. She said, okay, do that.
Then we started talking about it seriously. We went and got some advice from others in our community who had gone through an anthology process and sort of picked their brains and said, well, maybe we can do this. Maybe we can just figure it out piece by piece. We set up an email address and a website, and we didn't have any of these things to start with. And we did a submissions call that got picked up by Duotrope, so it was worldwide. Wow. And we did have submissions come from not just Virginia. We had some from New York and Texas and all over the U.S. And we ended up, the submission whole process was quite humbling and also quite surprising, because it was not only the poets that we had, hoped to support locally and immediately in our community, but also former Virginia Poets Laureate, people who had books, people who we really admired, and we're like, how do we possibly begin to put this into something? Or we were thinking maybe we'll have a little chapbook and we'll take it to Kinko's and we'll staple it and it'll be a great little thing. And then we're like, well, no, maybe we need to step up our game a little and start looking for a publisher and talk about doing this, a real deal. We got to work with a graphic designer for the cover, and so it sort of snowballed step by step and became, the book that you have now we're really, really happy with. It's a beautiful book. Chop Suey Books in Richmond did publish it, and they worked with us very closely in the last 6 months or so to make sure everything was right. We had a fabulous, fabulous designer who we found through the Visual Arts Center of Richmond, which does classes there, much like there are classes here in WriterHouse. And he was a graphic design teacher. And he's like, I've never done a poetry book. And we're like, would you like to try it for very little money? And he's like, sure. So we were very, very fortunate, both in our publisher and our designer, to put together something as beautiful and professional as what we ended up with. So that's my take on it. I'm going to let these ladies, if you have anything to add.
Well, the only thing not the only thing, I could say a lot, but
Yes, Marsha, go ahead.
First thing I want to say is my gratitude to having the opportunity to work with Judy and Joanna. Going into this initially, we were friends, but and then for a while you sort of cease to be friends, and then you realize, oh, I really love these women, and I really do, and I'm very grateful for having had the opportunity to work with both of them. I felt like each of us brought something to the project, not necessarily the same thing, so that was good, And as Joanna said, it sort of was like chewing on gum that you can't get out of your mouth. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, And I just remember a couple of times I did, I'm not sure they did, but I just said, oh my God, what is going on here, But it was all good. It was all good. It was just not, it was a journey that evolved. And that's my style. I like that. If I have to make a plan, like going on a trip, I don't do well with that. I want to go where the road carries me, And that's sort of how this was. And each person's contribution, I want those of you who are here to know this, as well as if you talk to other contributors, I think we've tried to say this. Each person's contribution was unique and special on its own merits. And the hardest part for me, because I had never done this before, other than grading papers in English class, but it's not quite the same thing. The hardest part for me was getting down to the decision making. It was really, really hard because Judy might say, well, I really like this because, and I said, well, I really like it too, but, and then Joanna would say, I don't like it. That's not quite fair. But it sort of sometimes happened like that. You know what I'm saying? So I felt camaraderie with each poet's piece of work because I know how hard it is to write poetry from yourself, from who you are, and you put it out there, and you hope that somebody will appreciate it, of course. So if I had had my way, this would be an anthology that's this thick, but it's just not the way it works in real life. So I also want to say to all of you contributors out there that you should be very proud and know that we did not take this lightly at all. We were very, very focused on the quality of the work and what we wanted this anthology to be. So I thank you, too, for trusting us with your work.
And just to give you some idea of numbers, we started with around 200 poems, which, well, I'll just speak for myself. I was amazed that we had 200 poems to start with. And so we started reading, and we read and read and read, and started making piles of what I really like this, and this not so much, I don't know. And somehow we came to consensus on the poems that you all contributed to the anthology, and it was a process of learning how to make those choices. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about how to make those choices, about the actual editing process, about putting together an anthology, how you have to place the poems on the page the way that the author wants them to look, with the margins that we have. It was some of them were quite challenging, and there was a lot of detail work that I was not aware of, and I do thank Chris Hibben, the design person, because without him, it wouldn't look as good as it looks, and that cover would not be there. So anyway, I feel that it was just a incredible experience for me. And see, the way I came into this is that Joanna and Marsha were meeting. No. I was over at Joanna's house, and we were talking. And Marsha comes in and says, oh, well, we were going to discuss this anthology thing. And then all of a sudden they're saying, well, wouldn't you like to be part of this? And I am like, totally, part of what? Okay, so that's how I got roped in. And over 2 years later, yay. But I'm glad that they included me. I am so proud of the work that we did together, so proud that we can display your poems so beautifully. And thank all of you for your contributions. It means a lot to us.
That's all true. We did sort of rope her in, and she didn't really ask for it, but she stuck with us. So thank you for that. And I want to add to everything that they've said about the whole process, and reading and rereading in piles and disagreeing on what we liked and what we didn't like. The one thing that the biggest takeaway message for me as far as submitting my own work and looking at it from the other side is that there needs to be one person. Like, you don't know who's reading your work. You don't know how many people are there on a committee or tiers of editors or what the whole process is. You may not know. But one person has to be touched in that line or that group or that committee. One person has to be set on fire by what you do and be willing to fight for your piece among all the other pieces, among their colleagues, and say, look, I don't care what you guys think, this piece is brilliant. And if there's enough persistence and they believe in it enough, if you've touched that person, if your work has that fire for that one person, that's sometimes all it takes to land at a publication, is that connection. So think about making your work magic, something magical about it, something on fire when you're putting pieces out into the world. That would be my one piece of advice that I've learned from submitting. So now we turn it over to you guys if you have any questions.
I'd just like to mention, like Judy was talking about the cover, and so I took a couple books to the Fredericksburg Book Festival and got a lot of compliments.
Oh, really?
Oh. Sold some.
Yay.
But to sell any poetry is and
Yes.
so one guy said he had designed book covers in the past, and he said it was really hard to get the typography, the fonts and all, and that it was a very good job.
Oh, good. Yay.
Thanks.
That's good to hear. Good to hear. We'll pass it on to Christopher. He's
Yeah.
kind of a
He teaches part-time at Viz Arts, and this, I think, was one of his, was it his first book? First poetry book, of course. So, and then he kind of fades into the background, So I really want to take some of these comments to him because we felt very, very grateful to him for doing what he did, because we had no clue about that. Richard?
The poems are gathered into sections. Were the sections determined as you worked through the poems?
No, the sections were not determined until after we had the entire body of work. And I'm glad you did mention those, because I think that's one of the things I'm proudest about with this collection is how we decided to divide the sections. Because for me, it goes back to wanting to support our immediate community. And we did have one submission that we really, really wanted to include the poet. We knew him. We knew he'd been really working hard to get published for a while. But his poems tend to run more prosaically. And the piece as a whole, we didn't feel it was going to be a good mesh. But we found some of the language, some of the phrases and lines were very beautiful and very striking. And so we went back and forth. This is after we decided on everything we'd accepted and everything we'd rejected. And we were trying to decide, so how do we connect it all? And I'm not sure how we boiled down to it. We said, well, let's take pieces from this poem. Let's take the lines and pull out what speaks to us. And then let's see if we can organize the poems from the collection loosely. And we had piles all over the place. I can't tell you, we cut out phrases, we had slips of paper, we had this it was a huge mess, and everybody had a different opinion about what the phrase meant and what the line meant, and what poem should fall underneath it. But we were able to make some sense of it ultimately. But it was based on the lines from this one poem.
And I'm familiar with that poet and the Richmond basis of the poem gave this anthology a unique look. It's really unique from that point. To have the anthology itself organized by a super poem over all of the others.
Yeah, and the poem was written by Tyler Turpin. He's mentioned on
And the
page in the introduction.
introduction.
In the introduction, yeah. Because that was just such an important piece for us in terms of being able to organize the sections and figure out what would go where. There were just some phrases that were, as Joanna would say, magical, and we used those.
And we wanted to do something to distinguish it from most anthologies. That we did some homework. We're looking at how do people usually organize anthologies, and they do it by season or by number or something very, very linear and expected. And we're like, well, we don't want to do that. So this worked for us.